will not be, I will never separate from this petal until I die.
After the church decision was released, the nuns were instructed to destroy all materials connected with the apparitions.
I think it was 1 week that we were burning and burning.
Sinunog yung diary ko eh, pati diary ni Mother Cecilia. Sinunog nila lahat.
Leaflets, books, novenas, everything. They were piles and piles and boxes. You had to burn all of that.
We began burning, then after about a week or less than a week, Mother Jacinta got sick. And after that, the whole community helped in crumpling the paper first. It extended to about a month in all.
We as exorcisters, we had to burn our own pictures at saka yung petals.
You burned? What did you burn, sister?
Petals and pictures.
I see. What about letters? Did you ever have a lot of letters?
A lot.
So you burned a lot of petals?
Not a lot, but a good number. At saka yung pictures niya.
These were the pictures of the statue?
Oo, for Blessed Mother.
Even the convent at Haro, Iloilo wasn't spared. Unfortunately, a young nun had excitedly showed her precious petal to one of the Carmelite investigators sent by the Generalate in Rome. And soon afterwards, Sister Mary Tayamora was ordered to burn all petals and material connected with the apparitions at Lipa. She states that as she did so, a gigantic blue flame issued from the small pyre, expanded to the height of 4 feet, and lingered until everything was consumed. The statue of the Mediatrix was also ordered destroyed, but the nuns couldn't bring themselves to do so, and devised ways and means to save it.
The statue, we did not burn it.
It was kept. And then it was in a corner, and then it was covered with cloth.
But they put a heart at the center to make it look like Immaculate Heart. And they painted it blue.
There was a time, and then it was exposed in one of the rooms. And then afterwards, I think, when Monsignor Santos or somebody else came and said, do not do that, so it was kept again.
Strict silence was imposed on the Sisters of Carmel. They were never to speak of the apparitions again. To reinforce this order, they were told that if they spoke about it amongst themselves, they would be guilty of a venial sin, and discussing it with outsiders would constitute a mortal sin and possible excommunication. As shocking as this may seem to us now, one has to remember that this occurred in pre-Vatican II times. Much has changed since then.
In fact, our superior from Rome came to us and told about it, not to speak about it anymore. Even Monsignor Reyes, the one who died, he told us, he brought us to the choir and then summoned us and said, it is forbidden to speak about that Lady of Lipa. So we kept quiet about it.
By declaring an absence of supernatural intervention in the events at Lipa, the Church had, in effect, implied that the entire affair was a hoax, and thus brought down upon Carmel a deluge of public detraction. But among the thousands of devotees, there was shock, pain, disbelief, and anger.
I don't believe in that.
I remember being very deeply hurt by all this talk.
I cannot accept that it is not true.
Ako'y para kung masama loob kay Monsignor Santos. Alam niyo ang hinihingi ko lang kay Mediatrix. Huwag ng shower. Papagyuhin mo ng petal to sa obispong ayaw maniwala.
I sort of felt offended when I heard the news that this was a hoax.
Masakit
Masakit sa amin talaga.
Because my faith is strong that happening is true.
Ari, yung alam namin totoo, ayaw silang maniwala kaya masakit sa amin.
Even if the people will not believe, I believe.
The first thing I told Mama Mary, please let me forget. No? Just please let me forget all these things, especially when I was out already. And just please let me forget. Because I respect what the church declares.
From the beginning, Carmel had its share of detractors, and with the release of the church's official pronouncement, skeptics had a heyday. The general rumor spreading at the time was that the nuns at Carmel were unscrupulous opportunists, conspiring and inventing stories of apparitions to make money for a new chapel.
There was all this ugly talk.
Can you believe na itong mga madring ito'y yapak? Tumutulog ay walang unang kundi kahoy, nagpapakahirap. Itong mga madring ito'y magdadaya. Sasabihin, yung mga flowers na yun yung galing sa itaas, man na sila nag-ano. Kayo makakapaniwala ba naman ang ganun?
I could not in my heart accept the fact that, that a hoax could be perpetuated by holy nuns, particularly Carmelite nuns, who are known for their faith.
Hindi napakalaking kasalanan kaya kami nandito para magpakabanal kung gagawa nun, di mas malaking kasalanan namin.
The sister never had an intention of building their chapel.
I would say that as religious, I think, impersonally, I cannot believe that they just want to deceive, just to build a church in their convent, and they will deceive people like that,
There was talk of a blower hidden within the convent, which the nuns purportedly used to create the famous petal showers. Sister Bernadette relates that Mother Marian Cuna suffered especially from this talk.
She had difficulty in the work because I think they were not believing. They thought that she was the mastermind of all those blowers. Because she's a character, she's stronger than Mother Mary Cecilia. So the blame was being put on her.
I was told that the sisters use a blower to blow the petals. But I could not believe it. Being a technical engineer, I know the effect of a blower. One, it makes a lot of noise. So those people there, they will notice the noise and then inquire why. Second, when you blow something, it goes in a curved direction due to force of gravity. But in this case, the petals just happened about 10 feet high and fell directly below. And besides, a big blower cannot reach probably 50 feet. And what happened with Mrs. Cason was about 70 feet away. How can it reach? So I could not believe.
I can testify. We have no blower. Because I'm the one cleaning the whole, we had only that, that whole cloister, no? And I used to work in the basement. I didn't see any blower.
And did you have electricity in your cells?
None.
In 1948, did you have electricity in your rooms?
When I entered, there was none.
There was no electricity.
None.
So, did you happen to have electric fans?
None. Okay.
So you had no electric fans. Therefore, the theory that there was a blower.
I do not even know what is a blower.
Because in the province, is it not we blow like that? Akala ko yun yung blower, yung pala ganun malaki daw yun.
Retired General Godofredo Juliano, then the commandant of Lipa Air Force Base, attests that the petals could not have been thrown out of an airplane or helicopter, as he would have been aware of the air traffic in the area. He too had witnessed one of the famed petal showers.
But I was not able to see anybody. I, in fact, went also a little beyond back of the side of the chapel to see if any of the windows were open. All the windows were closed. I could not determine the source from where they came from or how they started falling on the courtyard.
Guillermo Milan, then 35, who had fallen away from the church, did more than look. Convinced that the nuns were playing tricks, he clambered up a tree, positioning himself with a brownie camera next to what he saw was the only open window of the convent's second floor. And a little later, people began to cry, "Shower, shower," necks craning up as a fragrance filled the air.
Dahil salita, ako'y huli ko na ito. Ito iuhulog, madre. Ako'y talagang ready. Doon sa, ay naku, ang pangyayari ho, talagang ako'y kinikilabutan. Bakit ito? Ang mga tao nagtingala, wala nakakakita. Ako ho nakakita. Mismong isang petal na above the roof, paano manggagaling sa bintana? Nakumbisi ako ngayon, hindi sa bintana nanggagaling.
Climbing up to the roof, he was amazed to discover not one, but several freshly plucked petals arranged in the form of a rose.
Ang aking pagtaka, wala namang maglalagay o maghuhulog sapagkat ako'y nakaabang.
He hurriedly scooped them up, put them in his pocket, and fought off the pilgrims anxiously grabbing at him for a petal.
Siyasakal ako ng tao.
Upon arriving home, and in the presence of two reporters,
dahan-dahan kong binuksan.
He discovered that the petals he had so zealously hoarded had disappeared from his pocket, and only one remained.
Nawala yung maraming nilagay ko Yung pumatak na isa ang naroon.
And so began a change of heart.
Di nga ho, ako'y parang na-convert.
He ceased his nightly drinking bouts and started to help the nuns distribute the water.
Ang pakiramdam ko, nakipirmi ako'y mag-ano yung gasa ako, nag-aral na rosary. Hanggang ngayon ho, ang rosary hindi ko nakakalimutan. At before going to bed every night, ang Blessed Virgin ho, meron akong devotion sa Blessed Virgin. At nung ako'y nandito, nung ako'y makonvert na, lahat ho ng aking problem na mapakabibigat, solved.
Witnesses were also at a loss to explain how the petal's vertical trajectory could be maintained despite strong winds blowing across the courtyard. The images found on the petals also mystified many. Detractors, however, said that the nuns had impressed images onto the petals before throwing or blowing them down.
The person who told me about all this was a member of the commission, a scientist, Dr. Kisumbing at the time. He was director of the Bureau of Science. And he told me about how this whole thing was a hoax, it was fake, that some unseen hand or hands had, imprinted this outline of the Virgin on each of the petals with painstaking patience, I imagine.
Dr. Kisumbing's declaration that these petals were earthly and not heavenly ones elicited comment from some newspaper columnists who questioned his expertise by asking if he had ever had occasion to examine any petals that had originated from heaven. Despite what seems to be a lack of hard evidence or logical basis, the hoax theory has remained remarkably resilient over the years. And today, the dominant impression many have of Lipa is that of the nuns and their infamous blower. To this day, a number of journalists continue to propagate this theory without, it seems, any effort to check out the facts, irresponsibly repeating or culling from previously published misinformed reports. Without benefit of a thorough investigation, rumor was printed, then published as fact. And it is an outrage that no one ever thought to inquire if, in 1948, in an area laid waste by the devastation of World War II, the Discalced Carmelites, sworn to poverty, had the electricity or space required to operate a gigantic machine capable of blowing rose petals across a courtyard and several hundred meters into the sky.
The lady warned of persecution, and eerily enough, all those associated with Carmel were vilified and made to suffer. Stringent sanctions were imposed upon the community at Lipa.
Yeah, our vows were, were delayed. We could not make our perpetual vows. Several of us were scheduled already, but we could not make it because everything has been cancelled. It took years. It seems I don't remember, but it seems 1953 only, something like that, or 54. Yeah. And also the simple professions of the sisters and the clothings of the sisters were delayed. And then aside from that, we could not receive aspirants.
The files of the correspondence between the new prioress and the diocesan administrator bears this out. And not only were the doors of Lipa Carmel ordered closed to applicants for the religious life, but also, despite repeated pleas, to hired help and any outside assistance. It is also curious that in several chancery records documenting the history of the Diocese of Lipa, all evidence of the existence of the Carmel community has disappeared, and it is not even listed among the religious congregations residing in the area. The nuns were constantly berated by priests who came to Carmel to lecture and scold them for their alleged misdeeds.
I remember one of them when he came, and then we served him, no? But that was already after that. He said, "Oh, you see, you have plenty of things to serve because you really made money, and you bought all this with that money that you fooled the people."
It is humiliating because to be told that you are the dishonor of the order or of the church like that.
For a long time, Sister Elizabeth single-handedly supported the entire community through begging and was solely responsible for all of Carmel's external needs. She recalls that it was a very painful time, for she would be sneered and laughed at as she went about her duties in the outside world.
I had to run here and run there, go to the town, and then yung sinabi na, kami daw lahat ang nag-invento, nagpayaman daw kami, masakit.
Teresing subsequently left Carmel in 1951. She had been asked to do so, purportedly because she had not completed the residency required of a novice due to her frequent sessions with the commission at UST. However, instead of sending her away, Ma Mère, one of the foundresses of Lipa Carmel, instructed her to leave of her own volition, as this would enable her to return.
Hindi ako makatulog. Yak ako nang iyak sa convent. No? And then I left. I went to my parents.
After 2 weeks, she thought of paying a courtesy visit to the papal nuncio, Monsignor Bagnozzi.
So I went up and I was made to wait for half an hour there. Then when he came out of the door to see me, I stood up and I was going to kiss the ring. He didn't want to give his hand, no. And then I said, Your Reverence, I said, I just came here to let you know that I left Carmel for treatment, no. And he drove me away. He said, "You little devil," he told me, "you better get out of my place." He said that. Then I knelt again, so please give me your blessing. He did not give me my blessing. He did not give me any blessing at all. So, then I heard that he shouted at me, nearly pushed me out of the door. Because, hindi na lang balik. All for Mama Mary na lang. And my intention was very good. Parang just out of courtesy, just to let him know that I was out. So, umalis ako. And then when I went home, I was crying.
She told Cardinal Santos about it, and in the light of his denial of the authenticity of the events, his alleged reply gives one pause.
Sabi niya talagang, totoo yata yung sinabi ng mahalabiran that you will be suffering up to the end of your life.
The same might well have been said for the main witnesses of the events at Lipa, And yet, despite the deep tragedy that marked their lives, in utter obedience, they never made any official statements, only confiding to very close friends their belief in the apparitions at Lipa. However, those who had given the orders have passed away, and the rule of silence no longer applies. Nonetheless, we sought and secured Archbishop Caviola's approval for the interview with the Carmelites of Lipa.
Bishop Versosa stayed on in the old Palacio at Lipa until the end of his term, then joined Monsignor Oviar for a time in Lucena before returning to his hometown in Vigan to die. Sister Bernadette recounts that Mother Marian Cuna remembered the day the bishop came to say goodbye to the community at Carmel before leaving for Vigan.
He could not tell them that he was leaving, but she told me that he was crying, and the only thing that he said was, in patria, in heaven.
Monsignor Gregorio Salvatus, Versosa's secretary in Vigan for 27 months, described the aging bishop as a broken man.
A sickly old man, nervous, he was depressed, but he never complained.
To his dying day, the bishop was said to have treasured a replica of the statue of the mediatrix of all grace.
This is what he told me, that he didn't like to dispose of the image of the Virgin in his baptistry. It has remained there.
Bishop Pedernal opines that Monsignor Oviar was also thought to have been party to the nuns' alleged scheme, and this was perhaps the reason for his removal as auxiliary bishop of Lipa, and more importantly, what kept him for so many years from his position.
It had puzzled much the hierarchy, because the hierarchy is very much aware of the good things and everything, His Holiness of life, and the activities in the growth of in the diocese. You know, I remember 1 year, or not even less than 1 year before he became ordinary, the late Archbishop Lino Gonzaga. You know? He was then the president of the Bishops' Conference. I was already bishop. And the one time he cornered me there in Baguio. He said, "What do you know about this? Why is Bishop of there until now, after 3 petitions of the whole hierarchy of the Philippines, asking the Holy Father to appoint him as Bishop of Lucena, not just as apostolic administrator? Can you tell me something, enlighten me, why?" So he said, "You tell me, if Cardinal is the one that is blocking, are you willing to come with me to Rome, personally to the Holy Father? Are you ready to tell the Holy Father everything you know about this, what happened, why?" "Yes," I said, "I'm willing to go." But you know, after that talk of us, after 1 week, came out the appointment as ordinary of Lucena.
He was always telling me that he is fully convinced that there was an apparition. Whether he was saying that's genuine, was really miraculous, the way shower of petals. The only thing that he lamented was that the shower of petals was, for a very immediate, was being commercialized. And there were fake petals that were being distributed. He hoped that it would be reopened.
It is curious that Oviar was later to found a religious order which he named the Missionary Catechists of St. Therese. Therese of Lisieux, or the Carmelite nun called Therese of the Child Jesus, is also popularly known as the Little Flower, and is the saint for whom Teresita Castillo was named, for her mother had made a novena to this saint in the hopes of begetting another daughter. Teresine claims that the Little Flower had at times accompanied the Virgin in her visits to Carmel, and had even greeted the novice on her feast day. This saint is commonly associated with roses. In fact, the church beside the Generalate in Rome of the Carmelite Fathers contains an effigy of the body of Saint Therese, and in the glass case is a copy of her writings, and above it the words, "From the heavens I will let fall a shower of roses." The headquarters of the Missionary Catechists of St. Therese in Quezon Province includes a museum and shrine erected in the memory of Bishop Oviar, and his loving testimony of how highly he was regarded by his priests, parishioners, and missionaries. It is said that favors have been granted and miraculous healings occurred to those who have asked his intercession or prayed at his tomb. At present, there is a movement underway that seeks to present his case to the causes of saints.
Mother Cecilia stayed at Haro for 13 years and was brought back to Lipa only on March 14, 1963. She spoke very rarely on the apparitions, but one of the nuns report that she had indicated that when she died, everything would come to light. According to Mother Amy, who was prioress at the time of her death, Mother Cecilia must have had a premonition of this, for she asked permission to go, in other words, to die, in order to hasten the vindication of Mary, mediatrix of all grace. Shortly afterwards, on December 13, 1982, she fell from the stairs.
It was the staircase of the novices. We were farther in the recreation of the community. And they heard a big noise, and it was Mother Mary Cecilia. She was lying down on the floor. She struck her head on the windowsill, then from the windowsill to the cement floor, and she was bleeding very much. But she was still conscious. When we brought her up, she was still talking. So I think she said only, "It's painful," like that only. And then she was brought to the infirmary, and we called for the priest for the last anointing. And then she was brought to the hospital. But she was already unconscious when she was brought to the hospital. And that evening she died.
A week before her death, however, Mother Cecilia telephoned Teresing, requesting her to come to Lipa as she had something very important to say. But Teresing was bedridden with fever and asked what it was, as she could not come immediately.
Nagka-hint lang ako dyan nung sinabi niya na, do you know that Mama Mary is so beautiful, no? Mother, sabi ko, how did you see? Did you see her? I was in the telephone. No, naku, iniba na naman ang istorya. Ganun nakakabigla ba siya?
Teresing had suspected that Mother Cecilia had seen the Virgin, and on one other occasion had questioned the prioress about this, mentioning that a younger Vietnamese sister had caught her in the hermitage conversing and laughing before the image.
I was telling her, oh, siguro talaga, you are seeing Mama Mary. And I'll be very happy. I'll be very, very happy. Sabi ko ganoon. Change na naman ang conversation.
Sister Bernadette recalls an equally intriguing conversation she had with the prioress. This conversation had taken place in front of the statue of the mediatrix.
She said that this statue, she's already 18, she looks 18, and this statue, she looks 18, but in reality, she looks only 15 years old.
Sister Bernadette regrets that she did not pursue this conversation, for it had certainly occurred to her at the time that the prioress must have seen the Virgin to have said such a thing. On still another occasion, Sister Bernadette heard that the Virgin had consulted Mother Cecilia on the position of the statue's arms.
I asked her, is it true, Mother, that you were the one who told Our Lady that you would prefer her to be with extended hands than on her breast? She said, yes, because she looks more motherly with that position.
These enigmatic last remarks of the prioress is one of many signs that the story of Lipa has not yet ended. For even way back in the 1950s, circumstances seemed to prepare the way, as it were, for the reinvestigation of Lipa at some future, more hospitable time. Teresing, for one, was prevented by her deteriorating health from returning to Carmel, where access to her testimony would have been difficult. Some of the nuns who were vital witnesses likewise left Carmel for a variety of reasons, a circumstance which enabled them to speak freely on the events either as lay persons or as members of other congregations, foregoing the need of obtaining permission from the Bishop of Lipa. Sister Stephanie, for instance, left Carmel in 1952 and could not re-enter because of her failing health. She subsequently married a Lipa convert, Guillermo Milan. Mother Teresa of the Holy Face left in 1966 to found her own congregation. Sister Clotilde, then known as Monica of the Savior, left Carmel because she was diagnosed as tubercular, but upon subsequent examination at the Quezon Institute was found to be completely healthy. But perhaps even more intriguing is that Mother Cecilia, aside from affirming the authenticity of the apparitions, apparently also believed that the Virgin would return to Carmel. 2 weeks before her death, she spoke again to Sister Bernadette.
She told me that the year is ending and Our Lady is not yet here, because she's always expecting that Our Lady is coming back.
Testimonies as to Mother Cecilia's character also make it difficult to associate such a woman with deception, especially on a large scale as would have been necessary for a phenomenon like Lipa. Mother Cecilia was known for her virtue and her gentle, motherly care, and was very much loved by all those who came in contact with her.
I don't think she was telling any lie to us.
I trust her.
Why did you trust Mother Cecilia?
I know she is good. She is a holy woman.
The first papal nuncio of the Philippines, Monsignor Egidio Bagnozzi, fellow arch-conservative and friend of Cardinal Ottaviani, went on in 1958 to become apostolic delegate in Washington, after which he was recalled and made cardinal in 1967 and appointed president of the Prefecture of the Economic Affairs of the Holy See. We quote from his short biography in the book, The Inner Elite. This was a big disappointment to him. Earlier he had thought himself in line for the papacy, and he had counted at least in getting a major post in the Curia. What he ended up with was a sinecure, the title and salary, without effective control of the operations of this major Vatican financial institution. Monsignor Rufino J. Santos, initially apostolic administrator, then Archbishop of Lipa, went on to become Archbishop of Manila and the first Filipino cardinal. Failing health, specifically a serious heart condition, prevented Teresita Castillo from returning to Carmel. In her own words, she cried and cried for over 2 years. Her separation from the religious life caused her such deep grief that in an effort to lift her spirits, her parents persuaded her to go on a European tour, which was led by Monsignor Santos. 8 priests also comprised a part of the tour group, among them Monsignor Casas, who had also been a part of the investigative commission. One cannot help but wonder, why were these officials of the church not more circumspect or wary about being seen with Teresita Castillo? After all, she had been labeled a fraud, a crackpot, or judged by some to have been the victim of an overactive imagination that had duped an entire nation. In fact, Monsignor Santos continued for some time to function somewhat as her spiritual director, and had become a family friend, spending a few vacations at their farm and at times saying Mass at their home. Up until the last few years of his life, Teresing would visit him at the Cardinal's villa at least once a month for confession or an occasional dinner. It was only a little over a year ago that she discovered his role in the sentence on Lipa. Upon his recommendation, she began to work with Father Leo English at the Redemptorist Church in Baclaran, assisting in the now very popular English-Tagalog dictionaries, a job she continues to hold to this day. Of course, malicious tongues have commented on what has evolved into a lasting friendship, for Teresing has continued to serve and nurse Father English, whom she affectionately calls Lolo, the Filipino word for grandfather. Sometime in the early 1960s, she was involved in a vehicular accident which resulted in an injury to the nerve at the base of her brain. This brought on epileptic seizures. However, after 2 years of medication, the seizures disappeared. She never married, but adopted an infant left on the steps of Baclaran Church. Grace Irene is now a lively, intelligent, 19-year-old college student. Mother and daughter lead a very quiet and unobtrusive life in the suburbs of Manila. In obedience to the Church, she has never spoken publicly about the apparitions, nor issued any statements to the press, despite the proliferation of newspaper and magazine articles maligning her and criticizing the events of Lipa. However, because of the escalating demand to reopen the investigation, and after much prayer and consultation with her spiritual directors, she reluctantly consented to tell her story. Quite understandably, she is nervous about the resurgence of interest in the case, and has tried to prepare herself for the controversies that she knows will come. Teresing has to this day had to contend with accusations of insanity and fraud.
What caused the Church's rather hasty pronouncement on the apparitions of Lipa? Premised as it was on questionable grounds and on what seemed to be a rather flawed investigation.
Such efforts by the Church hierarchy to clamp down on reported supernatural manifestations also characterized other supposed apparitions in other parts of the world. Since 1933, more than 200 other presumed revelations have suffered the same fate. It is curious, though, that there was a series of so-called apparitions that occurred in the late 1940s that somehow seem related to Lipa. We refer to two in particular: Our Lady of All Nations, which began in Amsterdam on March 1945 and lasted for over 14 years, and the Great Mediatrix of Graces, which occurred in 1946 in Marian, Pfaffenhofen, Germany. In Marian, she requested, as she did in Fatima, and as she was said to have done 2 years later in Lipa, for the Saturday devotion. And the apparition of Amsterdam was by far one of the most controversial, as it dealt, as did the apparition of the Virgin of the Revelation in Tre Fontane, Rome, with the incorruptibility of her body, and surprisingly, with a pronouncement regarding the development of a last dogma in Marian history. It is pointed out that though there have been 2 negative pronouncements on this apparition, the much celebrated statue of the Virgin of Akita, whose locutions and accompanying supernatural events have been recognized by Bishop Ito and upheld by the Japanese Conference of Bishops, was inspired by the painting supposedly requested by the Lady of All Nations. In this apparition, she called on all Christian peoples to band themselves together and asked that the theologians see their battle for the Marian dogma through to the finish, assuring them of her help, revealing that she was being sent by the Lord and Master who wanted to give this world spiritual oneness. I come as co-redemptrix mediatrix at this time. Co-redemptrix I was already at the Annunciation. This means that the Mother became co-redemptrix by the will of the Father. Tell your theologians this. Tell them, moreover, that this will be the last dogma in Marian history. This picture shall prepare the way. Have this picture brought to the whole world, and thereby I mean the whole world, not only your country. The world is degenerating. The world is being afflicted with disaster upon disaster. The world will be and is, economically and materially, at a dead end. Wars will continue until the Spirit of Truth comes in with His help. Get the people back to the cross. Canon René Laurentin, theologian, leading Mariologist and author, explains that especially during the post-war years, the Catholic hierarchy as a whole was simply not predisposed to such mystic phenomena as apparitions of the Virgin Mary or of any other heavenly being. In his report on the church and apparitions, he points out that there was a period of effective repression and that apparitions suffered from the great severity of Cardinal Alfredo Ottaviani, assessor of the Supreme Sacred Congregation of the Holy Office. We quote,
"This rigorous and traditional man was responsible for the matter of private revelation and took harsh action through his decisions and imperative orders to bishops. It was through his influence, so it seems, that Bishop Halen, who was favorable to the apparitions of Borang, was removed from the decision process."
He was very severe for apparition and charism, special, extraordinary charism. He put an to different causes of canonization, like Yvonne Aimée de Malétroit or the Polish Sister Faustina. I think during the war it was troubled time. He was afraid to see tendency to Illuminism and
Yes.
and for this reason he thought he had to be severe.
The ultra-conservative Cardinal Ottaviani, also known as the Holy Terror of the Holy Office, or Big Brother in a cassock, was described as probably being the most feared man in the Vatican and had often acted as a self-defined policeman of its faith and morals, was retired by Paul VI in 1967. 3 years later, the floodgates were opened when that same Pope abolished the canon law that forbade any publication about apparitions. According to Laurentin, Ottaviani's successor, Cardinal Sepper, proved to be more open and flexible, and it was in this spirit that he worked out the new criteria for judging the nature of the presumed apparitions and revelations. Laurentin, who was consulted on the criteria, says that this attitude of openness is shared by John Paul II.
With our new Pope, everything is more open because he has a very good and open religious sensibility to every type of action of God. He wants not to put the action of God in a square, but to see where God is doing something. And it is also my way.
Efforts are underway to have the Lipa case reopened for investigation. In July 1982, Francisco Di Chanco, together with Nelly Quizon, Cruz Laurel, and some others, formed the Marian Research Center, which collected testimonies and information relating to the events of 1948. They gathered more than 5,000 signatures from the laity, pressing Lipa Archbishop Mariano Gaviola to have the apparitions of Lipa re-investigated.
While it is our pastoral duty to listen to the faithful, to pay respect to their own feelings, but we have also to safeguard the welfare of the church in general, and that is where the problem of making a decision lies quite heavily. There was one thing that was quite also revealing. It was a letter from our then Apostolic Nuncio, the Archbishop Carmine Rojo. This letter was dated something like 1970. And in the letter, what struck me is this, that it just says that with reference to this thing, please know that it has been found that the reported apparitions were real and pious imposture.
At least there were around 4 bishops who told me, work for it. Work for it, that's it.
Are there conversions happening?
In August of 1989, a small group of Lipa devotees began to get together every Saturday to honor Mary and to pray for the reopening of the investigation into the events of Lipa. Unbeknown to them, they were fulfilling one of the requests she had made in 1948. 40 years of silence were eclipsed in a matter of months, And the first penitential procession in honor of Mary, Mediatrix of all grace, was held 3 months later, and public declaration of the events of 1948 revealed for the first time since the proclamation of the unfavorable verdict. At the end of the ceremonies, testimonies were made on recent cures attributed to the intercession of Mary, Mediatrix.
Are there phenomenal healings happening?
Luz Palmares related the miraculous healing of her son, Raymond Julius, who suffered from a mitral valve prolapse, enlargement of the heart, and various other vascular illnesses. Aside from that, he had a cleft palate and couldn't speak normally. She began a novena to Mary, Mediatrix of all grace, hung a scapular with a petal around her son's neck, and within a few months his condition improved so dramatically that the operation recommended by the doctors was no longer necessary. Moreover, Julius soon found that he could speak normally.
I'm Raymond Julius Palmares.
How old are you, Raymond?
I'm 22 years old.
And what do you do?
I'm a music teacher from St. Bridget's College High School Department. Panginoon, narito ako.
In February 1990, a strange phenomenon was reported in the Granja district of Lipa, a few blocks away from Carmel. A luminous white outline of what seemed to be a woman in prayer began to appear in the evenings on one of the leaves of a tall coconut tree. Then 15-year-old R.J. Garcia, a member of the Protestant fundamentalist born-again movement, was reportedly the first to see it. He was convinced that it was the Virgin and has since been receiving instruction in the Catholic faith. Many saw it too, and soon crowds from all over Metro Manila and the outlying provinces flocked to Granja. The phenomenon received considerable print, TV, and radio coverage. The luminous figure was visible from about 6:30 in the evening to the early hours of dawn. Some say other figures were visible as well, such as that of Saint Bernadette, and others claim to have seen tiny twinkling lights dotting the leaves of the coconut tree. Some theorize that the image was merely projected onto the leaf by some trickster, or the reflection from the nearby lamppost. But others counted that it couldn't have been a reflection, as the image would remain intact on the leaf, no matter the direction the wind would blow it to. But there are those who claim to have seen more than an illumination on a leaf.
When we arrived there at the scene and looked upon the tree, instead of seeing the Fatima, I told my wife, no, it's not the Fatima, it's the Our Lady of Miraculous Medal, because the veil is blue, it's not all white, and her hand is spread like this. So, and my mother, I'm saying also the same thing. I was crying, I was trembling.
The silhouette was visible for 90 consecutive evenings. Then, on May 21st, the day after the silhouette ceased to appear, Sister Alphonse, the nun who had seen Teresina's sightless eyes in 1948, passed away. We were told that before she died, she had repeatedly asked when she would be interviewed for the Keithley report, as she had much to tell. Her dying request was to have the image of Our Lady Mediatrix of all grace exposed in the chapel of Carmel. The day afterwards, with the permission of Archbishop Gaviola, the controversial statue was brought out and displayed for the first time in over 40 years. On January 24, 1991, petals were again reported to have fallen at Lipa, Carmel. Teresina, her driver, and a real estate agent were inside the church, in front of the statue of the Mediatrix, when petals suddenly fell from nowhere.
Yung mga roses, parang nagmula sa kawalan. Mataas pa dito sa halaman na ito. Unti-unting nagkalaglagan. Parang hindi basta bigla. Yung parang nagsiswing kung paglaglag. Ngayon, puting-puti mga roses. Wala nang pure na puti. Hindi kami magsalita. Kung Panginoon kako, patawarin mo po ako kako. Nanguras agad ako kako. Kung ito man kako milagro, kako, patawarin niyo po ako kako. Ganyan. Naku, nung nakita ni Sister Celine, Oh, naku, sabi niya, ng milagro si Mama Mary, it's miracle, it's miracle.
The incident made a deep impression upon Mang Maning.
Ang kwan ko ba, yung feeling ko ba sa Panginoon na parang kako, baka may mensahe sa akin na, ano, pinagmilagrohan ako kasi hindi ko naman ako palasimbay. Ngayon, mula noon, binigyan ako ni Sister Celine ng Bible at saka prayer book at saka ano, sabi magsimba. Parang damdamin ko parang, ayaw ko ba, hindi ko ma-explain sa iyo. Kasi minsan, alam mo, pag ganyan, parang laki ng emosyon ko, hindi ko mapigil. Parang maluha ba ako maiyak. Pero sa talang buhay ko, hindi pa ako umiyak. Kahit ano mga problema.
A few days afterwards, 6 children playing in the garden at Carmel reportedly saw the statue of the Virgin of Carmel come to life.
Nakita ko po yung pong mata lumuluha po. Tsaka po yung paa po nag-close fit. Yung po kami nagdasal, nakita ko pong umiiyak. Bago pagkatapos po namin magdasal, ngumiti po. Malambot. Yung ano po, damit. Nung hinawakan ko po dun sa damit, malambot po. Hinawakan ko po yung pong damit, lumubog po yung kamay po. Yung pong kamay ko, lumubog po, lampasan po. Nakita ko po ito pong damit po ay nasasalimpar po ng hangin. Hinawakan ko po yung palad. Naramdaman ko po na malambot. Pagkahalik ko po sa paa, nakita ko po na naramdaman ko po para nga po ang paa na nagalaw.
This is extraordinary, and it is another factor for me to be prompted to study this really.
In the last 6 months, petal showers occurred with some regularity in Teresing's home.
Sort of here, on this level, fluttering, sort of suspended in the air.
In fact, the petal showers progressed to another stage. Several witnesses were present when full roses materialized out of thin air and landed on the stairs, altar, and bedroom of the Castillo home. And Teresing reports, with joy and apprehension, that she has begun to receive messages from Mary again.
If at all we are going to reopen this, we will do this as secretly as possible, as privately as possible, so that the composition or the members of the commission will not be under some sort of too much pressure, and they might be exposed to even their own personal biases.
On July 16, the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, Archbishop Mariano Gaviola declared that the controversial image of Mary Mediatrix of all grace would, for the entire duration of his term as Archbishop, be exposed to the public in the chapel of the Carmelite convent of Lipa.
The list of healings attributed to the petals and intercession of the Mediatrix continues to grow, and lay groups are busily gathering the testimonies. Prayers continue at Carmel every Saturday, and penitential processions wind their way around the town. The wait is on. In the meantime, after more than 40 years, it's showering petals again. Today's world can dismiss the petal showers as merely paranormal instead of supernatural, insisting that certain individuals are capable of bringing about incidents of extraordinary phenomena. We can always explain everything away, but then the question is, through all this rationalization, where have we left room for God? This is June Keithley for the 6th in the series of The Woman Clothed with the Sun.